Hey everybody, this is Deji.
And Chris.
Welcome to the Lot 1 podcast. On today's episode, we talk with Monique Dias about the importance of maintaining your network, avenues into getting into production design, and so much more. So let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Today we have Monique Dias on, who is a production designer and has been on a lot of pretty cool stuff that you probably have seen. So before we get into the interview questions, Monique, give us a little backstory.
So I am from Arizona. I grew up there and I moved there when I was 9 or 10. And so I was a really shy kid and having to make new friends, that sort of thing. And so my parents kind of pushed me into all these different avenues to try to get myself out of my little bubble. And the one thing that really stuck for me was theater. So I did a lot of acting and I got really interested in set design and that sort of thing. And at the same time, I got really into films and I started watching a lot of stuff. So fast forward, I decided to go to college and study general filmmaking. And I went to the University of Arizona and studied media arts. And I went in thinking that I would be a director. I think so many people who enter film kind of start with either thinking they're going to be an actor or a director, just because that's the first thing you kind of know. And along the way, you find your path. And for other people's projects, I'd often assistant direct, or I would start doing production design. And the assistant directing came from loving organization and being very type A. And the design stuff came from my mom. She taught me how to sew, and we would decorate and we would paint and we'd do a lot of crafts growing up. So I just kind of took that role on for all these little projects. And at the end of film school, I needed to figure out what I was going to do and where I was going to go and all that stuff. And I didn't feel ready to work per se, or just jump blindly into interning somewhere or PAing somewhere. And so I did two things. I applied for the DGA trainee program in New York to be an assistant director. I had interned in New York and I loved it. And I was like, I want to go back to New York right away. And the other thing I did was apply to the production design program at the American Film Institute, which I found out about that school through a handful of classmates who were also interested in the school. And I kind of got both. I passed the first round of the DGA trainee program, and I was invited back to get interviewed, which was the second step. And I got into AFI, and I was just so significantly more excited about AFI, just like in my gut, that I was like, okay, this is what I want. I know now. And I moved to LA and I went to AFI for 2 years and I jumped out, and I've been kind of working ever since, just trying to climb the ladder and get on bigger and better things. And yeah, that's kind of my journey into design.
That's cool. It's so interesting how, sort of a one decision can drastically alter your life.
Yeah, seriously.
Because if you'd have decided to go to, the DGA training program in New York, you'd be maybe a completely different life right now.
Absolutely. It'd be like a whole new career. It'd be a whole new place. It'd be new friends, new everything. It's really weird to think about.
But hey, you started in theater.
Yeah, I did.
Fellow theater kid.
Yeah.
Is it because of your sort of background growing up? Is that what drew you to being a production designer?
I guess I've always tried to pinpoint what it was. And I think this kind of happens for lots of people. You can kind of point at 10 different things that automatically tell the story of why you're choosing to do what you chose. So, I got into theater the way I did because my parents were trying to get me out of my shell. At that same time, my brother had a best friend who would come over and make little movies, and that taught me that filmmaking was possible. He had a camera and we would just perform. My parents also built a handful of houses in their life. And so we would go visit the construction sites for as long as I can remember. And I always thought construction was so magical to like start with a lot of nothing and then have something be built up over time. My mom, like I said, like all the, my mom was a older mom. She was born in the 40s. So she had a lot of old school traditional female qualities, and she was also very modern and independent too. But she taught, like I said, she taught me how to paint and sew and decorate, and uh, explored my creativity in that way. And yeah, I think it's just like a lot of those things kind of combine, and then all of a sudden you find your path. I also recently went to a concert with a friend of mine who's um, it's a funny way to say it, but I'm not a music person. Like I love music, but I'm not like, this is my band and I know the history of them and I follow them around town and I go to all their concerts. But I am like that with movies.
Hmm.
And I think so many people I know, when they were in their middle school years, started finding their personality and voice through music, movies, what they wore, what was in fashion, stuff like that. And you kind of glob into a direction. And yeah, that was just for whatever reason, movies piqued my interest. I loved reading. I've always loved storytelling, you know, so stuff like that.
When you say it like that, where it's like you use the analogy of like someone who's into music. It's an interesting way that you use that, because I've always been like, oh yeah, I love movies, and typically it's kind of like, oh, that's cool, like there's no like, people don't, it's either like you're a bro, like the broy like film people who are like, yeah, like Christopher Nolan, like, not making fun of them out there, I have plenty of friends who are like that, but like to be like, use it as an example for like an everyday non-film person to be like, yeah, but like I know so many people who are into sports and music, and especially music, and like
Yeah.
knowing when they're on tour, what they're doing, their background, and it's like, I don't know, it was just very opening for you to say that, of like, oh, so now I can just compare to that next time I'm made fun of because I like movies, like.
No, absolutely. It's even like the way people like genres of movies, or knowing the backstory of what's going on with the actors is like knowing the backstory of which musician is dating who, or
Hmm.
Yeah.
which player got traded to which team and why it's now dramatic in the world of sports. It's totally the same thing.
That is interesting to look at it from that lens for sure.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to get your idea on sort of what are the first steps that you took um, when you decided, hey, maybe after your school or maybe during school,
Hmm.
to get those first few jobs, those first few roles. What were some of the things that you did?
I think one of the greatest benefits of going to school, the worst part is the student loan debt. but
Preach it.
but that student loan debt did buy me contacts, right? A lot of my fellow classmates who were in different professions, whether they were producers, directors, DPs, would often recommend me for stuff. Fellow design classmates, if they couldn't take a job, they would put my name in the hat instead, or they would hire me as an art director as a second in command so I could get work. I've even had teachers put my name in. I PA'd on Modern Family, was one of my first jobs. And I
Nice.
got that interview from my teacher who was working in the industry, and a designer reached out to them saying, we're looking for somebody. And he gave them my name. So that was a lot of it. Also at the time, Production Hub, I think is what it was called. This
Yeah.
was like the early 2010s. And Craigslist were a thing. So I was, scoping jobs on there. And something I did that never panned out is I did a ton of cold emails. I got a list from the Production Design Union, the Art Directors Guild Local 800, of all the production designers' emails. And I sent out paragraph cover letters with a resume looking for work. And additionally, I guess other than that, it was like, a lot of those kind of grandma moves where you have an aunt who's like, oh, I know someone who works in film, my niece's uncle's nephew, or, some dumb thing like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Is a PA on this show, you should connect. And you're like, we don't do the same thing. But then, you take the meeting and you get to know people, and it's just a lot of that stuff until I kind of got my footing.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't think I've ever gotten a job from sending a resume to a person I don't know.
Same.
Yeah, me neither.
I've literally never.
I know, and
I've been
like, people press on it so much. I
They
was getting a little
do.
off topic, but like they're like, do it, and I'm like, I have. It never works.
To this day, I get cold emails from people maybe once a month. And because of that memory, I always respond and say, thank you. I'll keep it on file. And like, they're all in my email. And I do intend to like put together a master list of something in case I need to hire somebody. But if ever I'm in a moment where I need to hire somebody, I always go to recommendations. I feel like the film industry is such a word of mouth industry that that's kind of the only way, is to just meet people face to face and hope a friend of a friend recommends you when the time comes.
This is something I wasn't. I was maybe going to try to say for the after show, but I feel like in this industry, and I don't have tons of experiences in like every other industry, but I feel like in this industry, it is very unforgiving. If you like mess something up,
Mm-hmm.
then like you're like maybe never heard from again. Not like you're getting taken out into the desert and never heard from again, but like people are not really willing to like hire you again if like you've messed something up that is like big, so
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I think you're totally right. You probably won't get hired again, but also everyone kind of knows that. And I think everyone's also messed up somewhere along the way or angered someone along the way, that people are also genuine or generally careful about trash talking somebody. So like when I ask for recommendations, only close friends will tell me the full truth if they have a problem with somebody. Most people will give like a neutral kind of response or no response or a positive one. And if it's positive, then you can trust it. If it's neutral, then you're like, is it okay, or are they actually bad? So in that way, it's like, if you mess up, don't worry, because everyone does, and most people are afraid to get ratted on themselves. So
yeah,
they might not hire you again, but it might not affect you down the line the way you think it will.
yeah.
If it didn't cost a bunch of money, your mess up,
Yeah.
it should be forgiven. that's kind of like, even then, I mean, you should always forgive people, but like, I get it. But yeah, I've never understood the like, oh, that guy said that one thing wrong, or this person, didn't know this there's so many different phrases for the same things in this industry. Didn't know what a short boy was, or whatever, like something silly. It's like,
Makes up their own terms
I
too.
know.
It's like, in order to be a
That's
part
true.
of the club, every department has their own little
Yeah.
niche. It's silly, but
Well, for me, it's always like, I've worked in a lot of different departments, because you have to be kind of, especially in today's market, you really have to be flexible to just kind of do whatever job is kind of given to you or handed to you, especially independent. And I've done a lot of independent where we don't use official terms. When you wrap a cable, like I did it the way I was taught in college, and then like I went and worked on a set where there was a union person who was my boss in the G&E, and it was like, very like, these are the terms we use, this is how we wrap this. And I felt like I was so dumb. I have like 6 years of experience, and just because I don't know the official terms, or like, I knew everything, I just didn't know the actual names of it. So I'm like, go get this thing. I'm like, like, I hope I get the right thing, because I don't know what that official term is, or whatever.
I get that a lot in what I do too, especially because I work with I oversee a handful of different departments, and it used to make me feel stupid, but now I don't care. I've gotten to a point where I I recognize how much I know and how many different, like you said, you dabble in all these different things. You know a little bit of everything, but there's no way to know everything.
Mhm.
So like if I'm talking to my construction coordinator and I say the wrong word and they look at me sideways, I'm like, what do I care? That's why I hire you. So you tell me what the word is. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
now
yeah,
I know and I won't
100%.
forget.
Yeah.
And every job lately, there's been a vocab word that I've learned for the first time that is now my new favorite word that I'll never forget, and I just carry it with. I try to bring it up whenever I can, and it's always just so particular or random that it doesn't even matter. But
Like
yeah.
in just in a conversation where it doesn't belong to, just slip it in.
Yeah, like the two that come to mind is when you're on a sidewalk and it's the edge of a sidewalk and the ground dips so that the wheelchair can go into the street,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it has a yellow plate with bumps on it. That's
Oh,
called a truncated dome. And I learned that on a job and then I use it all the time. Or I always point it out to like be like, I know what this word is, to just be like a little brat. And then like there's like variegated is a word that you use to describe like the gradation in a leaf, like when the color changes from like a dark green to
Whoa.
light green.
oh,
And it's just and that's just art department terms, you know, like well,
yeah.
one's a construction, one is a greens word, but like to the original point, everyone has their language. There's so many words, you're never going to know them all. And by
Yeah.
the time you learn them, someone's going to make up some new dumb name for something.
You know what's crazy though is like you would never have, well, maybe not true, but like on average, you would never have learned the name of that the
Yeah.
bumps on going into the road or whatever on the sidewalk. What was it called? Something dome?
Truncated
Truncated
dome.
dome. You would never have known that unless you had to have needed to build it or it was in the way of your camera dolly or something. You know what I mean? Like how would you ever, which is applied to your job, which I think is super fascinating.
Yeah. And then you say the word and it doesn't matter that you know the word because no one else knows. So they're Googling to understand what you're talking about anyway.
Are you just saying like, and see that truncated dome over there?
There, and I pull out my monocle. Yeah.
And they're like, yes, I see it. Do you though? No, I'm just kidding. So I kind of wanted to pivot a little bit and ask what your first feature was that you were a production designer on, and sort of how did you get that feature?
I don't remember. The first one I was a production designer of was. Can I look it up? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, I think I know it.
Oh,
It's,
maybe.
Is it Interior Night? No, sorry.
Shah Bob.
Bob. Yeah, Shah Bob.
Oh yeah. That was also my first, I guess technically second job out of graduate school, but it was like a month after graduate school.
Got it.
And how I got it was in grad school, they gave us mentors from the class above us. And my mentor got offered that job. And she's like, they're paying nothing. I'm not doing it. But if you want to do it, you can. And it was like $150 a day, you know? And I was like, okay, cool. And it was a one-person art department. And it was a tiny, tiny film. It was this director. It's kind of his personal life story. And he owned an apartment complex in Hollywood and he wanted to be a director. So he made this movie. And it was, he had every friend in town. So we shot at all these really cool restaurants and every favor that he had. And I had like a budget of $500, which I think covered like props. And I just spent the rest of the time moving stuff around that existed in the place already. We shot in his actual apartment.
Nice.
I needed to find a kitten on Craigslist. Somehow that became an art department problem. So we had this kitten walking around. But yeah, that's all it was. It was someone put my name up and then I did it. And it was funny because I think like a year later we did pickups for it. Like we shot an additional scene and I had gotten a lot better and I figured out like how to do continuity and take continuity photos. And I started doing it during the reshoots and he looked at me, he's like, why didn't you do that the first time? And I was like, I had no idea to do it the first time, but I learned in the past year, It was a good time. That was a fun movie to start with because it was so low stakes. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So that person that passed the job on to you, was that like an alum, like a
Yeah.
person? Okay.
Yeah. She was, I think, 2 years above me. So yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
I want to dig in that a little bit. Now that maybe you don't want to answer because I don't know if it ages you or not, but how long has it been since you graduated?
I am 36. I graduated AFI in 2010, so 14 years.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, 2012. I moved here in 2010, so 12 years.
Does your network that you met at AFI still get you jobs today?
Yeah. Yep.
On a percentage, how much do you think that is?
Maybe 50-50.
Wow.
I could also, better to say is, at the very least, I could say that network, even if they didn't indirectly or directly give me a job, they might have got me a job with someone who got me the next job, and now that person hires me. Right. So the last film I did, my first studio feature for Sony that I did over the summer, that comes out in January.
What's the name of it?
One of Them Days. It got me titled a couple times, so I always have to stop and think. But it stars Kiki Palmer and SZA. My AFI producing best bud at the time, Denise Davis, got me the interview for the job, and then I got the job through that.
Nice.
And then the job before that was through my agent. I did a documentary earlier this year to fill some days, and that was through a producer who was my best friend and roommate in undergrad. I got ANGELYNE. I art directed that movie that TV show a couple years ago, and that was a production design classmate from AFI who couldn't take the job, and she put my name in the hat. And then I did Grand Crew, was through my agent. So especially the past couple of years, there have been like kind of 50-50.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you weren't kidding that you bought your network with your loans.
And I think like I do a lot of mentoring to young designers now. And that's the thing I always say. It's like when you go to school, you need to learn for sure, but you're going to leave more with the people you know. And everyone there is someone, it's not just your classmates who are producers and directors, also your classmates who seem like they're your competition. In school, the other designers felt like we were in all competition with each other, but we've all gotten each other so much work that it's just not the case. There's room for all of us. And our teachers, like I said, you don't even think about those guys, that they're on your side, and that it's not just that teacher-student dynamic. It's also like they're in the industry. They know people. At the very least, they know older alum who are doing it. So, it's all connections.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Speaking about sort of you sort of giving back, what is the Find Your People program?
So the Find Your People program, actually my friend Denise, who got me onto One of Them Days, she is connected to it. Issa Rae started it with Denise and a handful of other people. They have an initiative called Color Creative. And it's their answer to the DEI movement of like, how do we get inclusive voice or more inclusivity into the film industry? But also you don't want to just put someone into a top position that they're not ready for, because we're now trying to fill these spots with more diversity. So the initiative of the program is like bringing voices, teaching the younger generation as quickly as possible so that they can rise up through the ranks as quickly as possible. And so the Find Your People program has a similar setup to the American Film Institute, actually, where you apply and they choose 4 people per discipline. I think it's like directing, producing, design, cinematography, composing, editing. I think that's it. And they put 4 people into each category, and then you meet each other and you find your people and you get into teams, and they make 4 films throughout the course of the year.
That's cool.
And during that time, we also do a one-on-one initiative where we have like a one-on-one class. That's not the word, initiative. I can't think what it is, but there's a class for like a 6-hour class that you
Workshop.
kind of give everyone yes, thank you. It's a workshop where you give people a crash course into whatever the discipline is. So I taught one for design, and then I meet the students once a month over Zoom and answer questions and help guide them with their film, and also give them, any other advice they want, how to get into the union, how to find work, feedback on their websites, whatever.
Well, how does
Yeah.
somebody get involved in that?
I think it's just applying through the Find Your People website. They have an application, and just a normal submission process.
Yeah, I really like that. That's I mean, that's like exactly what I feel like a lot of people, especially when you come here and you don't have anybody, and you want to make something, and you don't necessarily need to be the director or the producer. You can be anybody, and you want to have a credit on something that is like gonna make it somewhere, So I think
Yeah,
that's really
and
cool.
the program pays for your films. I think they get 50 grand to make the short film.
Wow.
So it's like a very cool way to meet people and get to make something and just kind of get your feet wet as like, dive into filmmaking and,
Yeah,
exposing yourself to more experiences.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of turn it back around to the production design area. Because I know that you go back and forth, and actually this is something that I don't know if you know this or not, but I worked on ANGELYNE as well.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was a day player. I was a PA.
Oh, cool. On
But
the original, or they came back from
before,
okay, because they shot half and then
yeah,
COVID happened
I
and then
think
they
so.
picked back up.
I think
So,
I was on the shoot before they went to COVID.
and I came on after.
Oh, okay. So we miss each other. Yeah.
The Lot 1 podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Hat Coffee Company. You know what keeps me running on those long film sets, Stagey?
What's that, Chris?
Coffee. And you know what's the worst thing ever?
A swift kick in the pants.
No, bad coffee. So that's why I choose Tourist Hat Coffee Company's high quality coffee beans. Their artisan roasted single origin coffee and handcrafted blends are so much better than those stale stuff you get from those other brands.
Yeah, those things are bad.
Tourist Hat Coffee Company's coffee is artisan roasted, micro roasted, single origin, and their small batch roaster that handcrafts their blends to maximize peak freshness upon delivery. Family owned and operated. What more could you ask for from a coffee company, Deji?
I literally can't think of anything else.
If you're still not sold, a portion of each purchase goes towards contributing to some of their favorite nonprofit organizations, such as Animation Dance Community, Seeds of Hope International, and Beautiful Gate Orphanage.
These guys are good.
Make Tourist Hat Coffee Company your new go-to quality coffee choice with our exclusive offer for you, the Lot 1 podcast listener.
Oh, listen up, guys.
First-time customers can use the code LOT1BOGO at checkout to receive one free bag of coffee when you buy two. That's right, Deji, buy two, get one free.
Whoa.
So head on over to touristhatcoffeecompany.com and use promo code LOT1BOGO at checkout. Again, that is LOT1 BOGO at checkout. Whether you work in the film industry or not and want a delicious cup of coffee, this is the perfect time to stock up on your favorite blends of coffee or try something new. I know I'll be brewing Tourist Hat on my sets moving forward, Deji. Again, that's promo code LOT1 BOGO, LOT1 BOGO at checkout to claim your buy two, get one free. Terms and conditions apply. Tourist Hat, coffee that fuels your adventure.
But on that, you're an art director, right?
Uh-huh.
What's the percentage that you work as an art director versus a production designer?
I'd say 99% a production designer.
Nice.
Back in the day, I would art direct more just because I would need a job, and I would jump between projects. ANGELYNE is the last thing I art directed. And that was my mother died. And I decided to take a break from work to kind of deal with family stuff.
Yeah.
And when I came back and I was ready to work, I was like, I want to work, but I need something that doesn't have as much pressure. And my friend offered it to, she told me she put my name in the hat for it as an art director. Um, and I ended up getting it. And I thought this is a great way to get back to work because, you know, I can do what I love, I can work again, but it doesn't have the full pressure of being a designer. Um, and I'm so glad I did it. It was great for so many reasons. It was a really fun job to be a part of and some really cool sets to be a part of. And it was fun to see a different designer's way of running a department and kind of get some new ideas to apply to mine. I've met a lot of great people that I work with today. But yeah, I've come to terms that I'm not an art director. And I say that not as a belittling, I say it as when you work with a good art director, you know how good they are. And my art director I work with is fantastic. And the designer of that show actually is typically an art director, and she's fantastic in that capacity as well. And I'm like, oh, I thought I could do it, but not like you guys. You know, but
But you were okay with
yeah.
that realization, is what you're saying.
oh, yeah. And especially on that project, because she was typically an art director and she didn't design often, and I typically designed and hadn't art directed, her and I fit really well together. So I'm totally okay with that realization. I want to be a designer only. So it just kind of encouraged me to stop going down multiple paths and be more focused and go after exactly what I want rather than try to, you know, shoot my shot in different places.
Yeah. When did you you know, because it's a process, right? And you sort of mentioned that you kind of went up in the ranks, you know, from after school to now, you know, and now you're going after bigger movies and more exciting movies. Sort of when did that transition start to happen where you were doing more production designing versus art directing?
It was kind of two places. One happened to me, and one was an active choice. So, what happened is after I got out of grad school, I started doing anything I could get because I needed to work. And I ended up doing a lot of indie in all capacities, you know, PAing, set decoration, art directing, production designing. It was great, but I was broke. And then I got the opportunity to PA on Modern Family. And I was so excited because it was such a big show and like a proper art department with real offices, and they were building sets, and it was just big that I took it because I thought it'd be a great way to learn and like grow and experience the union world after having experienced the indie world. And at that same time, the Art Directors Guild had a portfolio review program that if you put together a portfolio and submitted it and got accepted, you could join the union. They would let you in and you could PA for a little bit, and then they would let you into the union. And so I submitted it. And because of my AFI skill set for my portfolio mixed with the fact that I was already PAing on Modern Family, they just let me into the union. And but I was so excited about it, but I realized that I had no idea what I was doing. I'm not a union production designer yet. I saw what one looked like, and it was Claire from Modern Family. And so they invited me to come back as a or an art department coordinator the following season because the art department coordinator was leaving. And I decided instead to jump ship and go back to indie and be a production designer and figure out how to be one so that I could feel confident in joining the union eventually. So that was one moment where I decided, like, this is what I'm going after. This is what I'm looking for. And I would rather do small projects as a production designer and climb that way versus be a PA on a big thing and climb the ladder that way. And then the second real turning point was a handful of my AFI classmates worked for a company called Awesomeness TV that did YouTube content and TV shows.
Yeah.
They started by doing, they had two types of things. They had 2-minute, 5-minute shows where they would shoot 10 episodes of something in 2 days. And it would be like a makeover show or a craft show or, something like that for YouTube. And then they had a long form narrative section where they did TV shows. Their most famous one is Pen 15.
Yeah.
And so some of the producers were working there and they needed a designer, and I was one of the regulars. And so I found my footing in that company and I worked with them and then ended up doing their narrative shows. And I worked there for maybe 4 years on back-to-back TV shows. And so that's really when I just started designing stuff all the time. So it was kind of like getting into a mini studio, so it really worked out.
Yeah, that's those like early YouTube companies. Because I worked on, by the time I got there, they were doing movies,
Mm-hmm.
but I worked for, it was Totally Sketch. They did like a bunch of like comedy shorts or whatever.
Yeah. Or like Funny or Die did it, or BuzzFeed
Yeah.
had theirs for a while.
Right. Yeah, it's cool because they're especially the YouTube companies, they're looking to make content all the time, and so you're just like they're kind of churning them out, so you get a lot of practice doing stuff.
You get a ton of practice. Most of the time, at least back when I did it, you didn't need to be in the union, but you would get into the union through it, because it was like back when new media was a thing. So we brought a lot of people into the union through it, and they had enough money to do cool things, but not enough to hire proper professionals.
Yeah.
So it was a really good beginner and intermediate place for anyone who was there. And we just kind of figured out how to make movies together.
Do you feel like you have a style?
No, I think I'm like Ron Howard.
Okay.
But that being said, some people have told me I do. I just can't see it. And often I think what I want to do, I can rarely convince people to do because it's so, I think, specific.
You give an example of that?
I love very rich jewel tone colors. So I got one set for the show Grand Crew, where I got to paint this girl's house this vibrant purple. And it's like, I love it, but it is a lot to look at. I love gold. I love, I grew up watching Moulin Rouge, all that gaudy nonsense. I love that. I love a lot of pattern. If you could see my house, this room that we're in is pretty boring, but like I have a room that is indigo, high gloss painted indigo.
Wow.
And then I have my living room ceiling is painted a mossy green. And in another room, I have this crazy jungle sort of wallpaper.
Nice.
I just love color and pattern. And there's just very few instances where it really makes sense for the work you're doing, especially because a lot of what I do are modern day stories or, LA, someone's LA house, it's not fantasy. It's not over dramatic. It's supposed to be more realistic.
Yeah. When I was doing the research, and we had a guest on before, Yoko Okamura.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any of her stuff? I feel like you guys would
vibe
pretty well.
Her favorite color is green.
Yeah.
Green everything. Yeah.
She's got a lot of green stuff. But just I watched one of her movies and it's very like poppy and very vibrant. Like the colors are very rich.
Yeah.
So I just, when you were saying that, I was like, oh, like I feel like you should meet Yoko.
My heart goes loud.
Being a production designer, what do you feel like has been the hardest lesson to learn?
The one that kind of is hard in that it kind of hurts the most is that I think, especially when you're not doing a fantasy or a period piece, people don't know what you do, or they don't appreciate how much work it takes, or they assume that when they walk into a space that it's just, this is how it always was. And I just feel like sometimes it's, I say that it's not from a place from like wanting credit or like pat on the back from doing a good work. Oftentimes it is frustrating from a place of, we're scouting a location and I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to need to paint this wall and we're going to have to gut the furniture, and then we're going to have to bring our own furniture in, and we're going to need this much prep time, and we need to patch that, and we need a scissor lift to get up there to hang a sign. I'm just calculating everything it'll take to get something done. And I'll ask for time, money, resource. And you have that producer or director or DP who says, oh, can't you just do it in 2 minutes, or you'll be on set and you'll have a whole plan of what something's going to look like, and then someone will be like, oh, can we get a statue of an elephant in this corner for the next shot? And I'm like, I don't have an elephant up my butt. Like, if you want it, you need a plan.
You don't just keep it in there?
No, I don't. So it's stuff like that where I that's the one that kind of hurts the most. And I have to do a constant practice of like, none of us know what we do or how much work it takes to do anything. We all underestimate each other. And remember that,
dig into that a little bit more, because as a producer, I want to know if, for example, that silly producer is like, well, couldn't you just like do this thing? Obviously, they're thinking in a very producer. Well, I would hope. I'm not going to say every single one does, but they're thinking in a producer mindset of how can we fix this cheap, easy, quick, right? And make everyone happy. How, as a producer, do you feel like you would want to be talked to as a PD of like that same conversation, but not in a like, well, could we just put up like a piece of paper, or like, how would you think that?
I think, to your point, when I hear producers say that now, I'm like, I know what they're doing. They're trying to make it fast, easy, like you said, and so I can start to curb my language around that. But I think the producers that have been the most helpful and a breath of fresh air, especially because they know what's going on with everyone else, like sometimes it's frustrating when I'm fighting to rent a $500 couch and they say we don't have the money, but then I see that they rented a $10,000 piece of equipment for camera that never gets used, and they don't, they're trying to do their best too, but it is frustrating to be that other department. But usually, to answer your question, the producers who typically they'll say, is there a way we can do this more affordably or with less time? I don't think we're going to be able to have more time. Can you explain to me why you think it'll take that much time, money, energy? Like, what are we looking at here? And then also, it's helpful when you have a creative producer who can kind of curb those conversations. And the thing that comes to mind on that specific point is when we were working on One of Them Days, the movie that's coming out in January, there was a specifically written set that was going to cost 50 grand to build. It was like a burnt out shell, and it was just very expensive. And I love building sets, so I wanted them to give me the money, but I also knew it wasn't a good use of our resources, especially when I would rather put that money into XYZ other place. And we were at this kind of point of contention between me, the director, and the DP. We all collaborated well. It wasn't like a bad place, but we all didn't know what to do. And the creative producer came in and she started writing her way out of the situation. Rather than saying we had to just cut this, and just get rid of it, she said, can we change the story point in this way so that we can go into this space instead of that space? Or, and those creative conversations versus just the logistic mind of, can't we just cut this, or can't we just do it this way? But actually turning it back into a storytelling point just opened a whole new door of possibility that actually ultimately solved the problem and solved it in a way that was really satisfying and looked good and made sense for the story. I don't know if I babbled
No,
on.
that I think it did. I think it did.
I think that's great. I mean, the one thing that I was thinking about is sort of like the lack of consideration, you know, for the things that you're trying to accomplish. If people were to consider the work that you're doing, it's gonna, number one, probably look better, and then also just feel better for you as the person that's in charge of that. And I think that that's a really good example of, you know, changing the story to fit our, you know, the constraints that we have, you know, which is time, you know, money, and there's another thing I'm forgetting, but I don't know what it is. But whatever the constraint is, you know, like we're you know, we're moving the playhead of the record player to a different point to then like view the story in this way.
Yeah.
Is a great way to like to honor the world that you're building, because you're building a world, right?
Yeah. Because it's like if you have a car and your budget can only afford a Hot Wheels car, but you want a Lamborghini, it's no one wants to bring the Hot Wheels car. I'd rather them write out the Lamborghini and do it in a way, and then we can put that money somewhere else. You know, it's like, how do you keep the quality alive when you're fighting against a budget? And you're always fighting against a budget. There'll never not be a budget to fight against.
Yeah. That's great. That's really good. We only have time for a couple more questions, but I did want you to talk a little bit about your foray into experiential theater and immersive design, because I know that you're starting to do more of that stuff, right?
This is very baby. Like, this is a very beginning thing for me. But where the desire comes from is I, because of the pandemic and the strikes, and also just climbing the ladder for so long, you start to realize that the projects that scratch your personal creativity are really few and far between. And that doesn't mean that, I've had plenty of jobs that I've loved, and that I've enjoyed and that I've got creative fulfillment out of. But that little baby project that I think all of us film people start with when we first get into this.
Yeah.
The more you do this, the more you realize you got one, maybe two of those in your life, and everything else is just work, and that's okay. But I started having this sense of like, I want more control over my future. And I want to expand my creativity. And I love filmmaking, but I also love design. And I went to go see this play called Sleep No More in New York. It's an immersive theater experience where, rather than watching the play in the audience, they dump you into the middle of a 6-story warehouse, and each floor is fully decked out. Like, one floor is a forest, and another one is an infirmary. Wow. And the other one is a back alley of like a British street sort of thing. And one's the interior of a hotel. And you follow 12 actors, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure. So all the actors are moving around all the floors, and the audience wears masks, and you follow them around, and you're not allowed to talk, and you watch them perform. And they do the play 3 times, so you have the chance to follow different characters throughout.
That's cool.
And if you go into a room, you can open the drawer and there'll be letters, and there's a candy shop and you can take candy off the shelves. And it's just so insane to live within a movie. And I know we're now in the world of VR, but like, I think this is beyond VR, like to have the tangible version. And I think it would be amazing and a lot of fun to do that, especially because, only the crew and myself get to live in my sets. And the sets I build are like that. There's so much detail, especially because a lot of people, like, if you look at my work, I feel like a lot of it is maximalist. Like, there's a lot of stuff on the walls and and on the furniture. And some of that's my personal taste, but some of that is just a response to a lot of creatives just wanting more density in order to make spaces feel full. And so when I'm working on a film, the crew can see a set that way, but when you watch the movie, you're never going to see it. And there's so many cool things we've done that just never get to live on camera. And that's okay. You know, that's how filmmaking works. But I feel like immersive theater and experiential design is kind of like a way to invite more people into the world and experience it more tangibly. And I love it. You know, I love that stuff.
That's a really awesome design.
Yeah,
I mean, that's an awesome idea.
Sounds
Yeah.
And
fun.
design.
Yeah. I know some I know a PD who does escape rooms
Yep.
and shows on like cruise ships.
Yep. That I think about Burning Man. I think about the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah.
Every horror, like Halloween haunted house we all go to, you know, this stuff.
That's really cool. And it's interesting that you mentioned those things too, because I didn't think about that, but that also is experiential, you know.
Yeah.
Less of a theater where there's something happening specifically that you're following, besides the escape room. But yeah, wow. We have time for one more question. Chris, take it away.
All right, thanks for the hype, Deji. Sorry. So if you had one piece of advice to give future PD, or we'll just keep it future PD, what would that one piece of advice be?
It would be, you know more than you think. I think production design, when you actually dive into it, starts to become overwhelming, especially when you get into the construction side of things and you're like trying to draft spaces, or you're learning about hardware and fixtures, or you're trying to navigate different time periods or furniture styles, or even nowadays, just like trying to give a visual world to people you don't understand or you haven't experienced. Like, you know, the amount of I've done hospitals. I've never been sick. You know, I did a show that had cancer patients in it, and we had to learn a lot about that topic. Or, you know, nothing comes to mind. Or I guess ANGELYNE, like that show took place in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Like, I've never personally experienced those time periods. I haven't lived in the country of every character in my movies. I'm not a man, so how can I do a boys' room? You know, stuff like that. All of that can become very intimidating or overwhelming, or you feel like you need to tread lightly and, you know, be cautious. That's the through line I see from a lot of designers I mentor and talk to. But the recurring thing to me is like, we all know more than we do. And everything is researchable. You know, if you don't know something, you can research it on Google, or you can go in person. I've really gotten into the habit of, I get teased about this from my friends a lot. They're like, oh, you just go wherever anyone else wants to go. You never decide to go where you want to go. And part of that is because I'm like, well, it's a good learning experience. I went to my first Lakers game last week, and, you know, and I saw what the stadium looked like, and I learned more about, you know, I know about basketball, but, you know, I'm being explained about all the characters. Or a friend of mine invited me to a concert last week, and I saw Manchester Orchestra and Thrice, and, you know, not my genre of music, but I really enjoyed it. And I was taking in the crowd and the people's outfits and the age of the people who listen to this band, you know, stuff like that. And so everything starts to become a learning experience. And it's just, the research of design can be more fun than designing. And the last thing I'll say on that actually is I really learned that lesson on this TV show I did called Foursome, where 4 friends went to like a spring break tropical island, and we were shooting it up in Malibu, and there was all this tiki themed stuff written into the script. And me and my decorator spent a couple weeks learning so much about tiki decor and the history of it, and meeting all these different vendors in town and learning the different materials and where it all comes from. And to this day, her and I have this little soft spot for tiki design. Like, she bought her first house and we're like, we got to build a bar, like a tiki bar in the backyard, and it's, all that learning is more fun than making sometimes. So just be open to all that.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's great.
Really good advice. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
There's a lot more I want to talk about, which is going to be great because we're going to do it in the after show. But for the people at home who may want to like find you or like, reach out to you, where can they go to find you?
You can find me on my one of my Instagrams, Esmo Duo. It's ESMO_duo, DUO. That's me and my decorators shared account. Or you can go to my website, moniquedias.com.
Nice. That's awesome.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And
Yes. Thank you.
we will see you in a few minutes.
Hey, bye.
Bye. That's a wrap for today's Lot 1 podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tourist Hat Coffee Company. Remember to use the discount code LOT1BOGO for your exclusive buy two get one free deal. Again, that discounted code is LOT1BOGO, LOT, the number 1, BOGO at checkout for your exclusive deal. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed that episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review and share it with your dog. It really helps others find us. Also, a big shout out to our producer, Mina Vazarian. She makes this thing all possible. Connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot 1 Podcast for behind the scenes content and updates. And we are now accepting listener mail. So, if you got any questions for our guests, drop us a line. Or even for us, drop us a line. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Lot 1 and all the things that we've got going on over there, check us out at lot1productions.com. Until next time, keep those creative fires burning, dream big, and remember, the filmmaking journey is a ride worth taking. See you next week.